The month the pension check came up short, supper moved from the icebox to the cupboard shelf. A can opener, one burner, and 15 minutes stood between a senior on a fixed income and a hot dinner that held its own. Nobody called it cooking. You just opened a can and fed whoever needed feeding. One dinner further down this countdown turned a single can of corned beef and a head of cabbage into a hot meal for a family of 4. And wait until you hear what one grandmother did with a single can of salmon and a handful of crushed saltine crackers. These were the meals people made when the checking account hit zero and the pride stayed right where it was. Before I go any further, for those of you who want more old recipes like these gathered in one place, I put together something called the Vintage Recipe Guide. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again. If you want it, it is there. Here are 25 cheap canned meat dinners seniors lived on when money ran out. Number 25, Spam and Egg Skillet. You sliced the Spam thin, maybe a 1/4 inch, and laid each piece flat in a hot skillet with a little butter. You let it crisp until the edges went golden and almost crunchy. Then you cracked 2 eggs right beside it and fried them in the rendered fat. Salt, pepper, a slice of toast if you had bread. That was the whole production. 1 can of Spam stretched across 3 meals if you were careful. Breakfast, lunch, and then a fried Spam sandwich at the end of the day. But when money was truly gone and the refrigerator had nothing else in it, this became dinner. Hot, filling, and nobody at the table pretended it was anything other than what it was. You ate it, and you were grateful. Number 24, Sardines on Toast. You opened the flat tin, laid the little fish across a piece of buttered toast, squeezed a few drops of lemon juice if you had half a lemon in the refrigerator, and ate them with a fork. The sardines were salty, oily, and rich enough to fill you up on 2 slices of bread and nothing else. Some people mashed them with a fork and spread them flat like a paste. Others left them whole and ate each one in 2 careful bites. A tin of sardines could sit in the pantry for years without going bad, and when you finally cracked it open, dinner was ready before the kettle finished boiling. This was old country food, the kind of supper that Portuguese and Italian grandparents brought over and never stopped making. Simple, fast, and filling enough to carry you through the night on pocket change. Number 23, Tuna Noodle Casserole. This showed up at every church supper, every potluck, and every kitchen table where someone needed to feed 4 mouths and had about $2 to work with. You cooked the egg noodles, drained them, and mixed in a can of chunk-light tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and a handful of frozen peas if you had them. Poured the whole thing into a baking dish, crushed saltine crackers on top, and slid it into the oven until it bubbled. The tuna was the cheapest protein in the store, not the fancy white albacore. The chunk-light packed in oil, those flat little cans that cost less than a candy bar. Seniors who lived through the lean years knew this casserole by heart. No measuring, no timing, no skill beyond the ability to open cans and boil water. It came out golden on top and creamy underneath, and it tasted like somebody cared enough to try. That mattered more than most people think. Number 22, Corned Beef Hash. Open the can, dump the hash into a skillet, press it flat with a spatula, and let the bottom crust up for about 5 minutes without touching it. That crust was the whole point. Without it, you had warm mush. With it, you had something that crunched when the fork went through. Some people cracked an egg on top and covered the skillet to let it steam. Others ate it plain with ketchup and a piece of white bread. A can of corned beef hash from the grocery store was one of the cheapest hot dinners you could put together in under 10 minutes. You did not need to add a thing to it. Open, fry, eat. 3 steps, no leftovers. Number 21, Vienna sausages and pork and beans. You opened both cans, sliced the little sausages in half lengthwise, and heated everything together in the same saucepan. That was the recipe, the whole recipe. The Vienna sausages added a salty, soft protein to the sweet and smoky beans, and together they made a meal that sat heavy enough in your stomach to get you through the night. Eaten with a piece of cornbread or a few saltine crackers, this was supper for one on a pension check night when you did not feel like standing in front of the stove any longer than you had to. The saucepan went from shelf to burner to bowl in about 4 minutes. You could eat and be washing the dish before the evening news started. Quick, quiet, and done. There was a time when the canned meat aisle was the most important row in the grocery store, not the produce section, not the bakery. The aisle with the short, heavy cans lined up like ammunition. For seniors living on a fixed income, that aisle was the difference between eating and not eating. A can of Spam could sit on the shelf for years. It did not spoil. It did not need refrigeration. It did not go bad if the power went out. And when the Social Security check came a day late or the heating bill ate into the grocery money, those cans were still right there on the shelf waiting. Nobody wrote a cookbook about canned meat dinners. Nobody had to. The recipes lived in muscle memory, passed from kitchen to kitchen, hand to hand. Number 20. Deviled ham on toast. That little Underwood can with the red devil on the label. You peeled back the lid, spread the ham thick on a piece of white toast, maybe added a squirt of yellow mustard or a thin slice of raw onion, and called it dinner. The deviled ham was salty, smooth, and packed with enough seasoning to carry plain bread without complaint. 2 cans and 4 slices of toast made a full meal. Some people ran it under the broiler for a minute to warm the top, but most ate it cold because the point was speed, not presentation. Seniors who lived alone ate this standing at the counter more often than they would ever admit. No plate, no napkin, just toast in hand and the can on the counter with the fork still in it. Number 19. Canned chicken and dumplings. This was the meal that made a cold apartment feel like a house. You opened a large can of chunked chicken, drained most of the liquid into a pot, added water or a splash of milk, and brought it to a low simmer. Then you dropped in small spoonfuls of biscuit dough, the kind you made with nothing but flour, baking powder, a pinch of salt, and enough shortening to hold it together. Covered the pot and let the dumplings steam for about 15 minutes without lifting the lid. That part was important. If you peeked, the dumplings went flat. The chicken fell apart into soft shreds in the broth. The dumplings puffed up thick and pillowy, soaking up the liquid from underneath while staying dry on top. Some people added a spoonful of dried parsley or a shake of black pepper, but nothing else was required. This was comfort in its most basic mechanical form. Hot starch, warm protein, and a bowl that kept your hands from shaking on a cold night. Women in Appalachia and across the rural South made versions of this going back generations, long before the chicken came in a can. The canned version was faster, but the principle was the same. You stretched a small amount of meat into a full meal by surrounding it with dough and broth. The dumplings did the heavy lifting. The chicken was almost a garnish. Grandmothers made this when their grandchildren came to visit, and there was nothing else in the pantry worth offering. The kids never knew the meal was born out of necessity. They just remembered the dumplings. They remembered the steam rising when the lid came off and the way the whole kitchen smelled like flour and warm broth for the rest of the evening. Number 18. Spam fried rice. You cooked a pot of white rice the day before and left it in the refrigerator overnight so the grains dried out and separated. The next evening, you diced half a can of Spam into small cubes, fried them in a hot wok or skillet until the outsides crisped, pushed them to the side, scrambled an egg in the open space, and then tossed in the cold rice with a few shakes of soy sauce. Stirred it all together over high heat until the rice picked up a faint char on the bottom. If you had a green onion, you sliced it thin on top. This was a meal that came to the mainland with military families who had been stationed in Hawaii and the Pacific. It traveled well because the ingredients traveled well. A bag of rice, a can of Spam, an egg, and a bottle of soy sauce could sit in any kitchen for months. Number 17. Canned beef tamales. You pulled them out of the can still wrapped in their paper husks, peeled each one carefully so the masa did not stick, lined them up in a baking dish, and poured the chili sauce from the can over the top. Some people added shredded cheese or a spoonful of enchilada sauce before putting the dish in the oven for 20 minutes. The tamales came out soft and warm with the corn masa soaking up every drop of sauce. A single tall can held 6 tamales, enough for a full dinner with a side of rice or a handful of tortilla chips. Grocery stores across the Southwest and the Midwest stocked these by the case, and they disappeared off the shelf faster than almost any other canned meat product. People who grew up eating them can still describe the way the paper peeled away from the masa in one clean strip when the tamale was heated just right. Number 16. Canned beef ravioli. You opened the can, poured the ravioli into a saucepan, and heated it over medium until the sauce started to bubble around the edges. That was the whole recipe. The ravioli came already stuffed, already sauced, already seasoned. All you had to do was get it warm. Chef Boyardee was the name on most of those cans, and millions of people grew up eating it straight from the pot with a spoon because transferring it to a bowl felt like a wasted step. The beef inside the pasta pockets was soft and finely ground, more paste than meat, but it carried enough flavor to make every bite feel intentional. Seniors ate this on nights when standing at the stove for more than 5 minutes felt like too much to ask. One can, one burner, one pot, and dinner was done before the evening news came on. Number 15. Canned roast beef over white bread. You opened a can of roast beef in gravy, heated it in a saucepan until the gravy bubbled, and poured the whole thing over 2 slices of plain white bread on a plate. The bread soaked up the gravy and went soft while the beef sat on top in thick, tender shreds. Some people added instant mashed potatoes on the side to catch the extra gravy. This was an open-face hot sandwich that diners used to serve for less than $1. When seniors made it at home with a can from the shelf, it cost even less. The bread turned translucent under the weight of the gravy, and you ate it with a fork and knife like you were sitting at a lunch counter downtown. The presentation was nothing. The taste was everything. There is a particular silence in a kitchen where only one person eats. The burner clicks on. The can opens. The plate goes down on the table across from an empty chair. Millions of seniors in this country eat alone every single night, and most of them stopped cooking real meals years ago. Not because they forgot how, because cooking for one feels like a confession that nobody is coming. But the ones who kept opening those cans, who kept heating the skillet, who kept setting a place at the table even when the other chair stayed empty, they understood something that the rest of us are still learning. Feeding yourself is not giving up. Feeding yourself is the last act of refusing to. Number 14. Corned beef and cabbage. You did not need the whole brisket and the all-day boil. You needed a can of corned beef and half a head of cabbage. Sliced the cabbage into thick wedges, boiled them in salted water until they went soft, and then crumbled the canned corned beef into the pot for the last 5 minutes so it heated through and broke apart into the cabbage. Drained most of the water, added a knob of butter and some black pepper, and served it in a bowl. This was the version that Irish and Eastern European families on the East Coast made when the real thing was out of reach. The canned corned beef was saltier and denser than the fresh cut, but it worked. It always worked. The cabbage softened into something sweet and almost silky, and the beef gave it enough salt and fat to feel like a proper meal. A head of cabbage cost almost nothing. A can of corned beef was a couple of dollars at most. Together, they fed 3 or 4 people with leftovers for the next day. You could eat it again the next night cold, straight from the refrigerator, and it tasted even better because the salt had worked its way deeper into the cabbage overnight. Seniors who grew up in row houses in Philadelphia and Baltimore and Boston ate this once a week as children and never stopped making it. Their mothers made it on paydays. Their grandmothers made it on any day. The recipe never changed because it never needed to. 1 can, half a cabbage, a pot of water, and enough patience to let it simmer. The taste was home. The price was survival. And the smell, that sweet, salty, cabbagey steam filling a small kitchen, was a signal to everyone in the house that dinner was ready and that someone still cared enough to make it. Number 13. Canned beef chow mein. La Choy sold it in a tall can with a separate, smaller can of crispy noodles banded to the side. You heated the chow mein in a skillet, poured it over the crunchy noodles on a plate, and ate it with a fork. The vegetables were soft and the beef was cut thin, almost shaved, floating in a sauce that tasted like soy and celery and something faintly sweet. It was not Chinese food. Nobody pretended it was. But it was hot and it was different from everything else on the shelf. And on a night when you could not face another plate of the same three things you had been eating all week, that difference was worth the price of the can. Seniors bought it because it required no additions, no sides, and no decisions. Open, heat, eat. The crunchy noodles on top made it feel like a real meal instead of something poured from a can, even though that is exactly what it was. Number 12. Treat and macaroni skillet. Treat was the other luncheon meat, the one that sat on the shelf next to Spam but cost a few cents less. You cubed it, fried it until the edges crisped, and tossed it with cooked elbow macaroni and a squeeze of ketchup or a splash of canned tomato sauce. The whole skillet came together in about 12 minutes. No oven, no baking dish, no waiting. Treat had a softer texture than Spam, almost like a firm pate, and it browned differently, more golden than crispy. Paired with macaroni, it made a one-pan dinner that required exactly zero skill and generated exactly one dirty dish. Seniors on tight budgets bought Treat specifically because those few pennies mattered when you were counting every coin at the register. Number 11. Canned turkey and gravy over rice. You heated the canned turkey and gravy together in a saucepan, stirring slowly until the gravy smoothed out and the turkey broke into soft, pale pieces. Spooned it over a mound of white rice and ate it with a fork. This tasted closer to a Thanksgiving leftover plate than anything else you could pull from a shelf in the middle of March. The canned gravy was thick and peppery, and the turkey, while softer than the roasted kind, carried enough savory depth to make the rice disappear one forkful at a time. A can of turkey and a cup of dry rice fed one person twice. You ate it hot the first night and cold the next morning straight from the container, standing at the counter before the coffee finished brewing. Number 10. Canned beef stew over rice. Dinty Moore was the name most people reached for. You opened the can, heated the stew in a saucepan, and ladled it over a bowl of cooked white rice. The rice doubled the volume of the meal without adding any cost beyond a handful of dry grains. The stew had potatoes, carrots, chunks of beef, and a thick brown gravy that clung to everything it touched. It was not elegant, but it was a complete dinner in a single can. The rice underneath absorbed the gravy and turned every bite into something that filled you up and kept you full until morning. Seniors who cooked for themselves knew this trick. The stew alone left you looking for seconds. The stew over rice left you pushing back from the table. One can of Dinty Moore and a scoop of rice. That was a Wednesday night solved. Number 9. Vienna sausage goulash. You sliced the little sausages into coins, browned them in a skillet with diced onion until the edges picked up some color, then added a can of diced tomatoes and a couple of handfuls of cooked egg noodles. A shake of paprika and a pinch of garlic powder went in last. You simmered everything together until the sauce thickened and the sausages soaked up the tomato and turned pinkish red all the way through. The paprika gave it warmth without heat, and the noodles caught the sauce in every curl and fold. This was a peasant dish remade with canned goods, the kind of dinner that Eastern European grandmothers would have recognized in spirit, even if the ingredients all came from an American grocery shelf. One skillet, 10 minutes, and a bowl that warmed you straight through on a January evening when the furnace was set low to save on the bill. Walk into any grocery store today and count the canned meat options. You will find a fraction of what used to be there. The shelf has shrunk. The brands have disappeared. The variety that used to stretch across an entire aisle now fits on half a row. Fresh chicken breasts and vacuum-sealed pork chops pushed the cans to the bottom shelf and eventually off the shelf entirely. Nobody in the marketing department wanted to photograph a can of potted meat next to an organic free-range chicken thigh. But the people who depended on those cans did not stop needing them. They just stopped finding them. The grocery store moved on. The customers on fixed incomes did not. Number 8. Canned salmon patties. You drained the can of pink salmon into a bowl, picked out the bigger bones and the skin, and mashed what was left with a fork. Mixed in a beaten egg, a handful of crushed saltine crackers, a squeeze of lemon, and a little salt and pepper. Shape the mixture into flat patties about the size of your palm and fried them in a skillet with a thin layer of oil until both sides turned golden brown and crispy. The outside crunched when you bit through it. The inside stayed soft and warm and tasted like something pulled straight from the coast and saved for a landlocked kitchen. Some people served them with tartar sauce, others ate them plain with a wedge of lemon and a pile of canned green beans on the side. A grandmother in North Carolina used to make these every Friday night because that was fish night in her house. She used the cheapest pink salmon the store carried, the kind in the tall can with the paper label. She crushed the crackers by hand inside a dish towel, and she measured nothing. A palm full of cracker crumbs. 1 egg, whatever was left of the lemon sitting in the door of the refrigerator. Her grandchildren fought over the last patty every single week. They did not know the whole recipe cost less than a loaf of bread. They just knew it was Friday, and Friday meant the kitchen smelled like crispy salmon and lemon and hot oil, and that was enough. She just stood at the stove and fried the patties until they were perfect, and when the plate hit the table, every hand reached at once. Number 7. Spam casserole. You sliced the spam thin, layered it in a greased baking dish with cooked rice, poured a mixture of 2 beaten eggs and a splash of milk over everything, then sprinkled shredded American cheese across the surface. Baked it until the cheese melted and the edges of the rice turned crispy where they touched the dish. The eggs set like a custard around the rice and the spam, holding the whole thing together so you could cut it into firm squares like a savory bread pudding. 1 can of spam, 2 cups of leftover rice, a couple of eggs, and whatever cheese was sitting in the drawer. 40 minutes in the oven and dinner was solved for 2 nights running. The leftovers reheated in a skillet the next day and tasted even better with a fried egg on top. Number 6. Deviled ham stuffed peppers. You cut the tops off green bell peppers, scooped out the seeds, and blanched them in boiling water for 3 minutes to soften the walls. Mixed the deviled ham with cooked rice, a spoonful of tomato sauce, and a little onion powder. Packed the mixture tight into each pepper, stood them upright in a baking dish, poured a thin layer of tomato sauce around the base, and baked until the peppers wrinkled and the filling firmed up. The deviled ham seasoned the rice from the inside, so you did not need to add much else. 2 peppers made a meal. 3 made a feast. The presentation looked like something from a proper recipe book, and nobody had to know the whole thing came together from 2 cans and a bag of minute rice. Number 5. Corned beef on rye. You opened the can, turned the block of corned beef out onto a cutting board, and sliced it as thin as you could manage with a butter knife. Piled it cold onto dark rye bread with yellow mustard and a leaf of iceberg lettuce. No heating, no cooking, no preparation beyond the slicing. The canned corned beef was dense and salty, and it held together well enough to eat with your hands over the sink if that was how the evening was going. This was a dinner that did not require a stove, an oven, or even a clean skillet. Just bread, meat, and something sharp enough to cut with. 5 minutes from can to plate, and you had a sandwich that tasted close enough to a deli counter to make you forget you were eating alone. Number 4. Canned pork and rice. You heated the canned pork in a skillet, breaking it apart with a wooden spoon until it resembled loose pulled pork. Seasoned it with a little garlic powder and black pepper, maybe a splash of Worcestershire sauce if the bottle was not empty. Served it over steamed white rice with a side of canned green beans. The pork was tender and fatty enough to make the rice feel rich without adding any butter or oil. A can of pork shoulder and a cup of rice made a quiet, solid dinner for 1 person with enough left over for lunch the next day. Canned pork was never glamorous, but it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It fed you when nothing else would. Number 3. Canned Vienna sausage and cabbage skillet. You quartered a small head of cabbage, sliced it into ribbons, and wilted it down in a skillet with a little butter and salt. While the cabbage softened, you sliced the Vienna sausages into coins and tossed them in on top. Let everything cook together until the cabbage turned translucent and the sausages picked up a faint golden edge. A shake of black pepper and a splash of vinegar at the end cut through the richness and brightened the whole skillet. This was a 1-pan dinner that cost next to nothing and filled the kitchen with the smell of warm butter and cooked cabbage. Seniors across the Midwest and the South made this on pension nights when the grocery money had already gone somewhere else. 2 cans of sausages and half a head of cabbage fed one person with enough left in the skillet for a second helping. Nobody planned this meal. It just happened when the shelf had nothing else to give. Number 2. Canned beef and gravy over biscuits. You heated the canned beef and gravy in a saucepan until the gravy loosened up and the beef broke into tender shreds. Split open a couple of biscuits, either from a can or left over from breakfast. Laid them flat side up on a plate and spooned the beef and gravy over the top until the biscuits disappeared under the brown. They soaked up the gravy like sponges while the beef settled into the cracks and crevices. Some people called this poor man's beef stroganoff. Others just called it Tuesday. It was filling, it was warm, and it cost almost nothing to make. 2 ingredients, 1 burner, 5 minutes of standing at the stove. The plate did not look like much when you set it down, but the first bite told you everything you needed to know. Warm bread, salt, and meat. That combination has kept people going since before anyone thought to put food in a can. Number 1. Canned chicken soup, not from the red and white can, made from a can of chunked chicken, water, and whatever you had left. A handful of egg noodles, a carrot you peeled and sliced thin, a stalk of celery from the bunch going soft in the crisper drawer, a pinch of dried thyme if the jar was not empty. You simmered it all in one pot for 15 minutes and poured it into a bowl that fogged your glasses when you leaned over it. This was the last meal in the rotation. The one you made when every other can was gone and the grocery run was still days away. No recipe, no plan, just heat and patience, and a bowl that smelled like someone's kitchen was still alive. Seniors who lived alone made this more often than any other meal on this list. Not because it was the best, because it was the most honest. A bowl of soup made from almost nothing, eaten slowly at a table set for one. That is not poverty. That is dignity with a spoon. Okay, now let's spice things up a bit with this next one. Heinz cream of tomato soup with a kick of chili was a bold twist on the classic tomato soup. Heinz, a brand famous for tomato soup, decided to add a little extra kick to this spicy version. The result was a creamy tomato base with a delightful hint of chili heat, perfect for those who like their tomato soup with a bit of a punch. The history of Heinz tomato soup dates back to 1897 when Heinz first introduced their classic recipe. This spicier variant was a fun, limited-time addition to their lineup, but it seems it didn't stick around for long. Still, it remains a memorable flavor for those who had the chance to try it. Lunchbox pizzas are something we're all way too familiar with. I mean, you grow up with enough of these throughout your childhood, and you start to see why people hate things like Feastables and Lunchly. How far have we fallen? Anyway, back in the day when actual food was still the norm for middle school lunches, this used to be one of the go-to recipes that parents would almost always default to. The biscuit rounds are flattened and pressed into these tins, or alternatively, one can also use a baking sheet. Then you have your usual criminals associated with an incredible pizza. Even an impromptu one like this manages to shine. The combination of pizza sauce, cheese, and sausage really can never be underestimated. The rest is all as you've always known it. Pop that bad boy into the oven and watch the dough rise in all its golden glory. Once it's ready, you have officially just made a pizza using canned biscuit dough. So first, pat yourself on the back a little because I think you can add chef to your resume. Second, go to town on that delicious pizza you just made. And third, know that you absolutely can spam this recipe as much as you'd like to in your life. As goofy as this name sounds, and please bear with me because I really can't say spork and speef without chuckling, it was actually a legit idea for an afternoon lunch. Before that though, let's get into what it is. Spork is basically just canned processed pork, and beef is exactly the same. But beef? I want whoever named these to win some kind of award. I'm not even sure if there's a category for best product names out there, but if there is, this guy should win. Luckily for this, the name wasn't the only thing it had going for it. It was really a lot like Spam, and it was affordable, easy to take around with you in your bag, and even easier to prepare since it was all pre-made. We're going to go into it in detail later, but this was really similar in texture and taste to Spam, just minus the tropical elements. It was a shelf staple. If you had a can of this and 2 slices of bread, you could pretty much make a sandwich today. See all those 10-step sandwich recipes on TikTok that ask you to go get a giant loaf of bread? Out with that, in with this. Bring back convenient sandwich making. Plus, Spief and Spork were really good because they were so versatile. It was even a competitor to Spam because you could pretty much pair this with any classic breakfast or dish that was typical for Americans and get to eating. It was a great way to liven up some meals that were otherwise good but had gotten pretty monotonous thanks to being such regular mainstays at American tables. Spief was definitely the better option for families though, since it was a mix of beef and pork sometimes as well. You could make some banger casseroles off of this. So, this creamy roasted chicken with herb dumpling soup was a total game changer. I mean, chicken soup just got a major upgrade. The broth was rich and flavorful, and those herb dumplings were the perfect addition. Chicken soup has been used as a remedy for colds and flu for centuries. Some believe it has medicinal properties, although the science is still debated. So, why did creamy roasted chicken with herb dumpling soup disappear from our shelves? Well, shifting consumer tastes and a focus on lighter, healthier options meant this rich, creamy classic just couldn't keep up. Plus, Campbell's had to streamline their lineup to make room for new favorites. This soup was known for its hearty and filling nature, making it a popular choice for families looking for a quick and satisfying meal, and it's missed dearly. Did you ever imagine that those farmhouse barbecue muffins could be made with biscuit dough? All right, in case you haven't heard of what a barbecue muffin is, let me give you a rundown before I drop that bomb on you. These would be muffins that would have a lot of ground beef, cider vinegar, cheddar cheese, and chili in the filling. So they were basically a savory take on a classic dessert format. Now, this recipe stays truer to form and tries to return to the sweeter elements the dish was known for with the biscuit dough and cheese. But there's also still an emphasis on being savory, following the idea the dish was inspired from. But instead of all that protein and chili as the star of the show, it takes full advantage of canned biscuit dough. For this one, you should really use Southern home-style biscuits over any other, because they really add that spicy flair that the South is so well known for. Here, you need to be even more careful than you were with the layering. You gotta press the biscuit dough rounds into these muffin tins, and you have to make sure they're packed in there tight. Those cups are also filled with a mixture that's made in advance. Don't worry, I'm not dumping a 10-step sauce on you out of the blue. All you need is barbecue sauce, ground meat, and cheese, and then you just get to baking. Want some additional cheese? Go for it and sprinkle some grated cheese on the top. Enjoy your lovely new savory muffin recipe, which you can abuse over and over again at any potluck. Speaking of casserole, this one's a mouthful to say, but trust me, it's worth the effort. Neolife. Nest Dehydrated Stroganoff Casserole was this pre-made mix that just needed water added to it so you could get rid of that icky dehydration part of the whole deal. I get why they did it because canned food that can't last is like a fish that can't swim. Kind of redundant, so it's all right. Plus, this thing always gets a pass for how close it actually came to imitating the flavor of a real casserole made from scratch. You had a creamy, beefy stroganoff cassie, which you could obviously tell is processed, but for what it was worth, which was just $1 or $2, and the amount of value you got out of it, nobody was complaining about a little bit of a powdery aftertaste. Stroganoff is definitely something that was more popular in their time, though. Have you eaten much of it, or is it something you regularly get a plate of? Progresso Italian Wedding Soup. This was a classic for a reason. I mean, who doesn't love a bowl of warm, comforting soup filled with tiny meatballs, spinach, and carrots? It was like a little taste of Italy in a can. Perfect for a cozy day in. Despite the name, Italian wedding soup isn't traditionally served at weddings in Italy. It's believed the name comes from the idea that it's a hearty and celebratory soup, perfect for a special occasion. The Italian wedding soup has roots in Southern Italian cuisine and was brought to America by Italian immigrants. Progresso's version was a convenient way to enjoy this classic dish at home. Though it's no longer available, It was a beloved choice for those who enjoyed a taste of Italy. Herb bread is probably the easiest thing to make on this list. It uses canned biscuits like Annie's or Pillsbury's, but the biscuit dough pieces are this time rolled into a melted herb butter mixture with lots of basic pantry staples. It makes good use of stuff like parsley, rosemary, and thyme, which are usually all laying around the house anyway. Once you have your mixture ready, you can get to stacking the dough pieces in a loaf or a bundt pan. It's a really simple dish, isn't it? It's nice to have things like that. Something that takes very little effort, costs no money, doesn't add to your worries, and leaves you more refreshed than you were before it came into your life. I think we could all use something like that, especially when it gets us out of bed and around our home, doing something we enjoy for ourselves. At least, that's the homely kind of feeling I get from this dish, but maybe you have your own associations with it, in which case I'd love to hear all about them in the comments section below. Are you a fan of herb bread, or is this your first time hearing about it? Now this one's really going to blow your mind. Imagine a world where you can get Monarch Alaska King Crab for just 50 cents, or max $1. See, that's my kind of capitalism. These days you go out on a date, and the idea of either of you ordering the crab really sets your finances back for the remainder of the week. Back then, it was literally in abundance. I mean, you couldn't go a day without your friendly neighborhood fisherman catching a fat, juicy crab that was just begging to be boiled. Of course, that meant that canned crab was an idea that wasn't too far down the pipeline. It was made to preserve the sweetness we've come to love crab for, and it was used in all kinds of dishes. Crab casseroles, salads, as a dip, or even crab sandwiches. The options were pretty broad. I gotta say, it must have been easy to keep in shape when all the protein you could ever want is that easy to get. How about you? Think king crab something you'd fill your cabinets up with if you were born back in our parents' days? Real quick, if you're loving this content as much as we loved making it, hit subscribe to stay connected and help us reach even more amazing folks like you. Feeling like your taste buds aren't being represented so far? Don't worry, we have a can for everyone, even the pickiest of eaters. Now, let's talk about Amy's Tuscan Bean and Rice Soup. Amy's is renowned for its organic and natural products, and this soup was no exception. This was a vegetarian's dream come true. It was creamy, flavorful, and packed with protein. And let's not forget that this soup was organic, so you could feel good about eating it. Tuscan cuisine is known for its simplicity and use of fresh ingredients. Bean soups, like this one, are a classic part of the Tuscan diet. Amy's commitment to using high-quality organic ingredients made this soup a favorite among health-conscious eaters. The Tuscan bean and rice soup was a perfect example of how canned soups could be both delicious and nutritious. It was all the rage for fitness freaks, and they still call for a comeback. Speaking of manual labor, let's take it a step further and go all organic with the food. Now, besides the canned biscuits, all you'll need is an assortment of your favorite fruits. Get in, we're making fruity pull-apart bread. This sweet, dense, fruit-packed pull-apart bread is made when you layer some canned biscuit dough with the preserves of fruit or sliced fresh fruit. Then, you take that and lovingly place it into a bundt or a local pan, after which you simply let it bake and rest. Once it's done, you're ready to pull apart each sticky layer of this wonderful confection. I recommend using Pillsbury's Sweet Hawaiian biscuits. Not only have I had them myself, and so I can attest to their fruitiness, most of the recipes tend to ask for canned biscuits that have a more fruity taste anyway. Each layer is also dusted with cinnamon, which adds the perfect warm kick this dish needs to round all those flavors off. If you like fruit-filled stuff, you're definitely going to love this pull-apart bread. Golden syrup is this really thick sugar syrup that is pretty accurately named because, wow, this thing has a vibrantly strong amber hue. That kind of fits the taste of the syrup too. When I see amber-colored things, especially sweet ones, my mind goes straight to caramel. Does that happen for you too? We'd both be right though, since the syrup was caramel-flavored. It also had a sweetener that really sealed the whole deal together, wrapped in a neat little bow. You could use this for so many things, like making your porridge a bit more lively with this, adding it to desserts for some extra oomph, or using it as a drizzle over buttermilk pancakes. The possibilities covered breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so you can see why every boomer's home had this in their pantry. A lot of easy and no-fuss baking recipes like flapjacks and tarts were pretty much reliant on this syrup, and for good reason too. This thing really tasted amazing. Speaking of vegetable soups, the Trader Joe's sweet potato bisque was a creamy, sweet treat that was beloved by many. This soup featured a rich, velvety texture with the natural sweetness of sweet potatoes. It was a great option for those looking for something a little different from the usual savory soups. Trader Joe's is known for its unique and seasonal products, and this sweet potato bisque was a standout for its flavor and quality. This one often made a grand appearance in the fall when sweet potatoes were in their prime. Unfortunately, it was a limited-time offering and has since been discontinued, but with the rise of easy-quick Trader Joe meals, I can see this one making a comeback to the soup aisle soon. Heart's Desire is a pretty serious-sounding name for a pizza, but it's also really fitting. After my first bite of this, it really was all that I desired. However, I know the real question on your mind is, what kind of pizza actually involves using biscuit dough? I mean, that's definitely an out-there idea, even for this list. Well, this personal pan is typically created by pressing the canned biscuit dough into a pretty flat shape, but here's where it gets its name from. You gotta flatten it, sure, but the shape it takes is that of a heart. That's actually why this dish became such a popular choice for Valentine's and cute little surprises for your significant other. Dinners during anniversary week, a basket of gifts in hand, the 14th of February in the air. It's the perfect meal for a lover's day, and if you're thinking of going all out for one, then this is a great idea to test out. Plus, it really adds that personalized touch to the whole thing, you know? Gives it some serious sentiment. But if you think that's all they had, you're sorely mistaken, my friend. Sometimes boomers would get tired of the regular routine and switch it up with Armour Star's barbecue ribs in a can. Yes, actual, well-made, pre-cooked saucy pork ribs in cans. These were meant to last and were made in a way that helped extend their shelf life. Ever wonder where the whole idea of preservatives started from? So, by the time of the 1940s and 1960s, the entire population had pretty serious battle scars from the Depression. Years of living off of crumbs and government rations will do that to you. What that did do was create an extended effect where even after peacetime began, people were still living by their frugal habits and mindsets. Everyone wanted what would save a buck, and canned food producers took note. First up, we have the classic Campbell's Chunky Chicken Corn Chowder. This creamy concoction was a staple for many families in the 90s and early 2000s. It combined tender chicken, sweet corn, and a rich, creamy base that was oh so satisfying. Now, soups were everywhere in the 90s, so what made this one stand out in the canned soup aisle? Well, it was the chunky texture. Plus, it was the classic hot meal for a cold day. Originating from Campbell's, a brand known for its iconic soups, Chunky Chicken Corn Chowder was part of the Chunky line, which aimed to provide more filling options. It's rumored that this soup's popularity soared thanks to its frequent appearances in TV commercials and endorsements by celebrities. Yeah, remember that soup advertisement with former NFL player and current sports analyst Jerome Bettis? Sadly, this soup seems to have disappeared without a trace. I mean, what's a soup without corn? It's like pizza without cheese. If you think of munching, it doesn't necessarily need to be round and bite-sized. It could be something like savory biscuit breadsticks too, which honestly worked just as well as garlic knots. You would take biscuit rounds and roll them into these really elongated shapes and then follow a similar routine. Brush with butter and season, then bake. They used to make use of Pillsbury Flaky Layers biscuits or Annie's Organic Flaky Biscuits, though a lot of people preferred Annie's because those gave the biscuits an airy texture you wouldn't otherwise get. It's a bit sad that they went out of fashion to the point most people don't really do anything with a dish like this anymore. Sure, you can get those same breadsticks at any bakery or as a side at a restaurant, but there was this rustic charm to making them on your own on a lazy Sunday and eating up an entire batch, you know? It really gave off a specific vibe like you were a 20-something roaming a French city and getting adjusted. You're going to see the name Pillsbury Grands used a lot in this list, because it was just that popular as an ingredient in dishes like the ones on here. You couldn't just make knots or sticks with it. You could even make things like cheesy, caramelized onion skillet bread. It was kind of like its own biscuit lasagna, a doughy, layered box oozing with flavor, comfort, cheese, and caramelized onions. All of this was achieved by baking it in a skillet, but even that wasn't the biggest catch. The thing that really makes this dish shine is that moment when it comes piping hot and you pull it apart, revealing all that goodness that's been baking layer by layer. It took some meticulous arrangement, and it took a pretty sensitive touch and attention to detail to get it right, but it was all worth it. You'd see that golden biscuit exterior come out only to reveal an even brighter, gooey, cheesy heaven inside. This was one of those dishes that you wouldn't munch on your own. It was something you'd make when you had friends or family over, because just like a good lasagna or a casserole, it's so much better when there's people around to share it with. If we move on over to the kids' menu for a second, we'll find alphabet spaghetti, every boomer parent's dream food. The dish was simply canned tomato sauce pasta, but the pasta spelled out the alphabet. It's a little educational, a little tasty, and pretty cheap. Its best quality is easily that it could be paired with a number of things like toast, ham, or sausages, and you could even mix some peas and corn in there for a bit of a nutritional kick. It was a favorite for families with lots of children, and back in the day, that was pretty much every family. Hooray for Planned Parenthood, I guess. You could also serve it up plain as it is, but that was more for kids that had already acquired a finer palate, which happily included pasta. Most kids were still eating mud from the playground, really. The playful shapes and vibrant sauce weren't just meals, they were fun on a plate. Parents loved how easy it was to prepare, especially after a long day, and kids were entertained while eating. It wasn't uncommon for families to turn dinner time into a mini spelling game, laughing at the words the spaghetti created. For parents looking to stretch their budget, these cans were lifesavers. They packed enough carbs to keep growing kids full and satisfied. Plus, it made vegetables like peas and corn just a little more bearable for picky eaters. This quirky meal became a symbol of simpler times, where dinner didn't need to be fancy to be memorable. Now, who doesn't love a good clam chowder? And this Panera Bread version was absolutely incredible. It was creamy, rich, and packed with clams. It was the perfect comfort food, especially when paired with a crusty piece of bread. Panera Bread clam chowder was a creamy seafood chowder that brought a taste of Panera's Bakery Cafe experience to the canned soup aisle. This soup was a favorite for those who loved seafood. Clam chowder is a classic New England dish. There were two main types: New England clam chowder, which is creamy, and Manhattan clam chowder, which is tomato-based. Panera Bread's clam chowder was inspired by the classic New England-style chowder, which has been a staple in American cuisine for centuries. One of the most iconic ways to enjoy Panera's clam chowder was in their famous sourdough bread bowl. This one unfortunately fell out of flavor, but Panera Bread's other soups continue to be enjoyed by many. Another wonderful biscuit combination that involves sausages is the sausage cheese biscuit. It actually adds biscuit dough before the baking and uses cooked sausages. Here's the trick though. This time around, you need to cut open both the sausage and the biscuit in perfect halves and fill them with cheese. Some recipes actually make the workload a lot easier for you by making it so that you mix the sausages and the cheese into the dough, but if you really want to nail the presentation, you should definitely go for the first method instead. Honestly, any kind of biscuit works here, and so does any kind of cheese. It's all up to your preference, but the basic blueprint here is one that works way too well for the amount of effort it takes. As good as this tastes, it's probably for the better that the story of this recipe ended with it getting lost in the past. Lower fat and lighter breakfasts in general just work way better, especially when you have a job to get to in 3 hours. While it tastes great, it's one of those breakfasts that puts you right back to sleep, and I struggle to follow my alarm as it is. Now, who could ever forget Campbell's soup? This is a household staple if I've ever heard of one, and it's a pretty magical thing when you think about it from the boomer's perspective. Today, we're spoiled. Let's face it, we are. We walk up to a store and get anything we want packaged, canned, or frozen. But all these goodies started somewhere, and Campbell's Soup was one of the most popular and long-lasting brands to do it. It had this condensed soup that just needed water or milk added and came in accessible flavors like cream of mushroom, chicken noodle, and tomato. The range with this thing was insane. Did you know you could even use this soup as the base for a casserole or as its sauce? And all that for just 10 to 12 cents. Pretty good steal, right? Considering it wasn't just a meal, it was a lifesaver for busy moms and a comforting staple for families during tough times. The iconic red and white can became a symbol of good food, finding a place in nearly every pantry. Campbell's ads even taught clever recipes like turning cream of mushroom soup into a creamy pasta sauce or a gravy for meatloaf. All right, let's talk about this Campbell's Homestyle Chicken Noodle Soup. This was a vegetarian's dream come true. It was creamy, flavorful, and packed with protein with a combination of white beans, rice, and spinach. Campbell's. This particular variety gained popularity in many states, especially in the Midwest, where hearty soups are a staple in comfort food cuisine. One of the most memorable aspects of Campbell's Homestyle Chicken Noodle Soup was its iconic advertising campaign. The ads featured the chunky soup label prominently and were often endorsed by celebrity athletes like NFL stars. Interestingly, Campbell's even made a point to highlight the homemade quality of the soup in their marketing, suggesting that it was made with the same care and attention as if it were prepared in a family kitchen. Chicken noodle soup has a long history as a go-to comfort food, and Campbell's Homestyle version aimed to take that tradition to the next level. Despite its popularity, this version eventually fell off the shelves. Keep that casserole dish out and hot, because you'll need it next for egg biscuit bakes. This is just layered biscuit dough with eggs and cheese, but nothing has to stop there if you're feeling hungry enough. People have been known to add all kinds of their own toppings to this dish. I mean, it helps after all that there's an extreme variety of things that tend to go really well with eggs and cheese. Sausages, bacon, ham, turkey, ground meat, or even beans and chili. Anything works, really. The best part? This can double as a brunch meal, and no one would even know that you used canned biscuit dough to make what they're pigging out on. That's just how good it tastes, so if that got your attention, follow along. Here we use Trader Joe's biscuits, but they aren't the trick this time. The real magic is in how well you can beat the eggs before you pour them over along with the rest of the ingredients on the dough. The consistency has to be just right to get that dreamy, fluffy egg texture, but once you get the hang of it, this is definitely one to keep in your arsenal. So, canned mincemeat was something you'd get for dirt cheap. I'm talking about barely 25 to 30 cents, which puts prices today to a world of shame, but who's comparing? I am. It hurts. We used to be a proper country. Boomers really did enjoy that time, and I can't blame them. You get chopped meat complete with spices and aromatics for that price, and you start to realize why and how these people were making pies every day. Anyway, you want to take a guess at how the mincemeat craze really started? When canned food first started appearing, the whole idea here was to advertise it in a way that really sold the "you don't need to work for your food anymore" factor. They'd say things like this'll help keep the wife out of the kitchen, and people would just eat it up, literally. Then you start having things like televisions roll around, where people largely just moved to things they could easily eat while watching and didn't take a long while to make. And you get how mincemeat became the iconic canned food it is today. Next up, we have lentil soup from Progresso. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lentil soup? Really? But trust me, this wasn't your grandma's lentil soup. Progresso kicked it up a notch with roasted veggies, giving it a smoky, flavorful twist. It was a great way to sneak in some extra protein and fiber. This was one of the healthiest canned meals out there, and its taste spoke for itself. Lentils have been a staple food for centuries, dating back to ancient Egypt and Rome. They're packed with nutrients and are a great source of plant-based protein. Progresso's version took this traditional dish and gave it a modern twist with roasted vegetables. Lentils are still loved in many countries in Asia, but the States have had enough of this protein option. Unfortunately, this particular variety has been discontinued, but it was a great example of how Progresso was always experimenting with new and exciting flavors. This soup might not be for everyone, but it was definitely a dish that had people licking food off their fingers. Okay, so this time we're using Immaculate Baking's organic biscuits, which are the ideal base for this turkey biscuit stew. It's a pretty hearty dish that uses a creamy, vegetable-packed turkey stew along with the biscuit dough rounds that we've been using so far to make our magic. Think of this as like a DIY low-effort turkey pot pie. It even tastes more or less the same. Here, you actually need to pull out the casserole dish for once for the stew, and then you arrange the rounds of biscuit on top of that. Once that's done, and it's sitting all pretty, you just put it into the oven and wait until the stew begins to bubble. It's pretty dense calorically, but it tastes amazing. Some kind of sleep on this dish because of those calories, but to them I say that it has no more calories than your average McDonald's meal, but it does have 5 times the vegetables, so maybe it's not too bad every once in a while, twice in a while, maybe on Saturdays and Sundays. This time around, we're going to talk about the miracle that is canned rice pudding. Sweet, creamy, and topped with just the perfect amount of cinnamon, vanilla, or nutmeg. This was the definition of a no-effort meal. I'm not joking around when I say all you needed to do was grab a spoon and rip that can open. As far as desserts went, it was pretty hard to compete with this 20-cent wonder and how much of a chokehold it had on the market. You could make more fancy desserts out of it, or you could just stick to the rice pudding, but for $1, you had pretty much your entire family fed. See, that's the economy we signed up for when we thought I'd grow up and get a job. I get that we can't print more money and all, but is bringing back affordable rice pudding too much to ask? Sometimes being a boomer doesn't sound so bad. What about you? Think you'd settle down in another era if you could savor all the food we don't have anymore? Campbell's Oyster Stew was another unique entry in Campbell's lineup. This soup featured oysters in a creamy, buttery broth, a delicacy for seafood lovers. Oyster stew has roots in early American cuisine, especially in coastal areas where fresh oysters were abundant. Campbell's Oyster Stew was a way for people to enjoy the luxurious taste of oysters without needing to go to a seafood restaurant. Oyster stew is a traditional dish that has been enjoyed for centuries. It is believed to have originated in England. While it may not have been everyone's cup of tea, it was a notable attempt to bring a bit of seafood elegance to the canned soup aisle. Amy's Organic Lentil Vegetable Soup was a crowd pleaser for those who loved a hearty vegetable-packed soup. What's not to love about a healthy soup that tastes just as good? With its blend of lentils and a variety of vegetables, this soup was both filling and nutritious. Amy's has always been a champion of organic and wholesome ingredients, and this soup was no different. It catered to health-conscious consumers who wanted a quick, easy meal without compromising on quality. The canned aisle didn't have many healthy options back then, so this lentil vegetable soup was all the rage. Chimichurri monkey bread is a pretty savory interpretation of a traditional monkey bread, but it works. It works a bit too well, even. Like, replace something from your top 5 kind of well. This uses biscuit dough that's coated in chimichurri sauce, which is what gives it that savory edge. Plus, the seasonings and herbs that go into that sauce are just next level. They're simple, but they create this perfect tang that works so well thanks to the biscuit dough. It's one of those dishes where all of the ingredients cooperate together to make something that's so much more than any of them on their own. All right, that's enough hype. Let's get into what work you needed to put in the kitchen to get a fresh batch of this. You had to cut your biscuits into really small pieces and toss them into the sauce, and this was a pretty crucial part since it was when they would soak up the flavor. Next, you'd layer those pieces up in a bundt pan until they were dazzling brightly and aromatic, and voila! Your monkey bread is successful. Sounds pretty simple, right? Try it. It takes barely any time, and it's so much better than your biscuits would be on their own. Throughout the Depression, the war, and every little bit of chaos after, canned bread was a constant friend, ally, and supporter of the American people. This dense, sweet, and spongy bread used to get that way thanks to a neat little trick known as steaming before canning, which really helped it retain that airy, sponge-like texture. This was used in war for soldiers as a part of government rations, and even organizations like the Red Cross would have it during many of their food drives. For just 20 or 25 cents, you could get some pretty decent bread, and the entire idea of this was to market how practical and convenient it is. I gotta say, it worked because people bought it in droves. Seriously, go ask your mom and dad about how much people used to get canned bread back in the day. and how it was used for rations. They pretty much paired it with things like Campbell's soup or used it as a side for other dishes that involved bread. Not everybody even had an oven back then, and in an era with an increasing focus on hustling and grinding your way into a nice little retirement, the appeal of baking bread from scratch for a few hours wasn't really something people were too into. All right, let's get a little weird with it. We're talking about Campbell's mock turtle soup. Now, before you wrinkle your nose, hear me out. This wasn't actually made from turtles. It was a Victorian-era concoction made with beef, veal, and sometimes even calf's head. Campbell's mock turtle soup might sound like something out of a fairy tale, but it was a real-life favorite for many. This soup was inspired by the traditional English dish, mock turtle soup, which was created as a more affordable alternative to the expensive turtle soup. The result was a unique, somewhat exotic flavor that set it apart from more common soups. The name mock turtle was just a fancy way of saying it was a fancy soup. Mock turtle soup was a popular dish in the 19th century. It was often served at grand dinners and banquets. Unfortunately, this historical recipe has long been discontinued, but it still holds a special place in the culinary world's history books. So, Americans have this knack for imitating flavors of established classics with new, unorthodox recipes that haven't been tested before. Since we have moved on to the skillet section, it's only fair I mention turtle skillets, which were first inspired by the pecan and caramel heavy flavor of turtle candies. It's also another dish that needs some good skill with layering, and biscuit dough can be a lot harder to work with. That's not all it has in common with the skillet that came before, because it also uses Pillsbury Grands. However, some people really swear by Trader Joe's buttermilk biscuits instead. Apparently, they come much closer to the flavor of the candies. You have to try it out now with both and let me know in the comments. Before you do, stick around for just a minute while I explain what you'll need for this. Luckily, you won't be here long because all you need is the biscuit dough pieces, a skillet, some caramel sauce, pecans, chocolate chips, and a scoop of ice cream or chocolate syrup. If you're an avid baker already, then you're definitely going to enjoy this dish. It's also perfect for some homemade trick or treating material if you're into that, instead of buying at the grocery store like so many people do nowadays. That's also kind of why dishes like this fell off, because, well, the things they were imitating became so readily available in every store and app on your phone that you just lost the incentive to make interesting mock food like this. Mixed vegetables were pretty much what they sound like. You had the usual gang of peas, green beans, corn, carrots, corn, some celery, and corn again. Did I emphasize that they really liked their corn? I hope I did. Anyway, for just about 15 cents, all the nutrition in the world was at your fingertips, and it was a massively good way to plan your meals and save money at the same time. You could use this as a standby meal, put it in a pot pie, use it for casseroles and side dishes, or whatever else. Stir-fry them and serve it up with rice or eat it with some chili. The world is your oyster. Or your carrot? Anyway, you could do a lot here. Also, it was a really convenient way for grandmas and home chefs to sneak in some greens in their kids' foods without them realizing it. Can't walk up into the kitchen and say, "Mom, no carrots," if she pulls a fast one on you and sneaks ready-made vegetables from a can, huh? Okay, brace yourselves. We're talking about Heinz kidney soup. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kidney beans? But trust me, this wasn't your average bean soup. It was thick, hearty, and packed with flavor. It was a staple in many households, and I'm honestly surprised it's no longer on the shelves. Kidney beans are a good source of protein and fiber. They're also versatile ingredients that can be used in a variety of dishes. The soup was part of Heinz's effort to offer a variety of options beyond their famous tomato soup. While it may not have been as popular as some of their other offerings, it was appreciated by those who enjoyed its distinctive flavor. It's no longer available, but it remains a notable part of Heinz's soup history. Ham and cheese biscuit stacks are another savory treat that makes full use of biscuit dough and all the wonders you can make with them. Sometimes you have these with a nice, delicious spread. Sometimes you go all in on the mustard. Both times, they're a snack that'll redefine your idea of what a can of biscuits can really do. So for this one, I really recommend using Immaculate Baking Organic Flaky Biscuits. You can be safe and stick to the Pillsbury ones, but that's what the recipes say. So don't shoot the messenger because I have warned you now. Anyway, you have to split and bake each biscuit, and it needs to be a very clean horizontal cut. Then, you layer with ham, cheese, and any other kind of condiment you want, but remember to layer between the halves of the biscuit. Once you stack them up, put them back in the oven to melt that cheese, and then you're done. The smokiness of the ham with the thickness of the cheese and the crunch of the biscuit dough makes this a powerhouse dish in all aspects. Deviled ham is pretty much exactly what you're used to seeing. The finest ham you've ever seen in a can, minced to perfection and blended with just the right amount of mustard, spices, and seasonings. You can make sandwiches out of this or use it as a spread, but beyond that, it's not really something you could do too much with it. It's one of those canned foods that doesn't really have much in terms of variety, but does excel at what it does, so we'll give it a pass. You could get it for 20 cents or just a few more, but if you really wanted ham heaven in a can, then the obvious pick was Underwood. This was arguably the most dominating brand and helped every grocery store drive its sales up for the month. Not to mention, it was responsible for a lot of ham sandwiches. People swore by its versatility, often packing it into school lunches or smearing it on crackers for an easy appetizer at home parties. Deviled ham's spicy kick gave it a unique edge, making it a favorite for picnics and road trips too. Housewives appreciated how long it lasted on the shelf, giving them a quick fix for surprise guests or after-school snacks. And who could forget the iconic devil logo on the packaging? It became a recognizable staple in American households, a small but satisfying indulgence that offered the flavor of home-cooked ham without all the effort. You know how boomers love a good low-effort food. Deviled ham may not have been the star of gourmet cuisine, but it was undeniably a reliable classic. Let's talk about Pepperidge Farm Hunter's Soup. Pepperidge Farm, known for its high-quality baked goods and foods, introduced this soup to offer a substantial, flavorful option for busy families looking for a quick yet satisfying meal. A fun twist? The soup's name and concept were influenced by the company's commitment to capturing the essence of wholesome, country-style cooking in a convenient can. This was a hearty, meaty soup that was perfect for those cold winter days. It was packed with chunks of beef, carrots, and potatoes, and it had this rich, savory broth that was just incredible. Hunter's soup is believed to have originated in England as a meal for hunters to warm themselves up after a long day. It was a favorite among those who enjoyed a more meaty soup. Now take me seriously when I say this, but you could get canned or bottled chocolate milk too. I know that's not exactly new information because you can still get it, but what you might be surprised to know is that your mom and dad at 30-something were still more likely than not avid chocolate milk enjoyers. You can hold that one over their head next time they tell you to eat like an adult when you walk in with some Dr. Pepper or cereal for breakfast. This was just as good as any chocolate milk you could at home, and it cost just a few cents. The powdered alternatives were even more affordable, but they didn't have that same magic that the canned ones did. These really were deliciously sweet, and I don't know if they actually used a lot of chocolate, but most of the companies I tried that were popular in the boomer era really had a strong cocoa flavor. The classic Franco-American spaghetti and meatballs. Did you know Franco-American spaghetti and meatballs was one of the first canned pasta meals to bring a taste of Italy to busy American families in the 1930s? I'm not sure why they discontinued this, but it's a major loss for the canned soup aisle. This was a childhood staple for so many of us. The sweet tomato sauce, the tender meatballs, and the perfectly cooked spaghetti. It was comfort food perfection in a can. Franco-American was known for its ready-to-eat meals, and this particular offering was a favorite among those who wanted a taste of Italian food without the hassle of cooking. While spaghetti and meatballs are often associated with Italian cuisine, the dish actually originated in Naples, Italy. Although it's no longer available, it was a popular choice for families looking for a convenient meal. Next, we're going to look at a classic for coastal cities, which is some old-fashioned canned sardines. Usually, the cans would be filled with oil, water, sauces, mustard, or tomatoes, and they had a lot of flavor and health benefits. You could get some really vivid and salty fish that also happen to be full of omega-3, making your Lank account only slightly lighter and your body 10 times fresher. Plus, the best part about fish like this was just how easy it was to make it and all the things you could do with it. You could steam the fish, boil it, or even grill it and fry it. If that wasn't up your alley, then you could just eat it with crackers, make a sardine sandwich, or even dice it up and use it as a pizza topping or in a salad. People even used sardines in pasta, and I don't know about you, but I think that covers most of what we eat in our daily lives. All that for just 10 cents? Sign me up. Plus, sardines were arguably the most common catch of the day. That explains why they're so cheap. But it also meant that this was a taste pretty much everyone had acquired over years and years of eating them, so not only was it cheap and good, it was familiar and nostalgic. Real comfort food vibes, you know? Every one of those meals came from a shelf and a decision to keep going. If you have not made one of these in a while, try one this week. The Spam and egg skillet or the corned beef and cabbage or even that canned chicken soup, set a place at the table. Sit down, eat it like it matters, because it does. Tell me in the comments which one of these your family used to make. I read every single one. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. I will see you there.